There are places in America where your phone would become almost useless. No endless scrolling. No engines humming outside. No constant alerts asking for your attention. Just the sound of footsteps on dirt, the creak of a wagon, the rhythm of work, and people who still know exactly where they belong. And somehow, in a world more connected than ever, communities like this often seem more united than the rest of us. The Amish are often described by what they do not use. No social media. No personal cars. No television in the home. No constant flood of digital noise. But that description misses the real story, because the strength of Amish life is not built on what is absent. It is built on what is still present. This is the story of how an Amish community stays together in an age designed to pull people apart. At first glance, Amish life can look like a rejection of modernity. Horse-drawn buggies on paved roads. Plain clothing in a culture obsessed with self-expression. Homes without many of the devices most people now consider basic. But if we stop there, we misunderstand them completely. The Amish are not simply preserving an old lifestyle like a museum exhibit. They are making active decisions about what kind of world they want to live in, and more importantly, what kind of people they want to become inside that world. And that is what makes this more interesting than a story about simplicity. This is really a story about community design. Because in much of modern life, convenience is treated like the highest good. Faster communication, faster travel, faster entertainment, faster shopping, faster everything. But the Amish operate from a different question. Not, does this make life easier? But, what does this do to our relationships? That one question changes almost everything. Before going further, it is worth saying something important. There is no single Amish lifestyle. The Amish are not one completely uniform group. Different Amish communities follow different rules, often called the Ordnung, an unwritten code that shapes daily life. The color of a buggy, the use of certain tools, whether a phone is allowed in limited ways for business, even the exact boundaries around technology, can vary from one community to another. So when we talk about the Amish, we are talking about a broad tradition, not a single script followed by everyone in exactly the same way. Still, across that diversity, one pattern shows up again and again. Their rules are not mainly about nostalgia. They are about protection. Protection from speed, from pride, from dependency, from fragmentation, and from the kinds of habits that slowly weaken a shared life. That may sound strict. In some ways, it is. But it also helps explain a question many outsiders keep asking. How does a community stay united when it gives up so many of the tools that modern society treats as essential? The first answer is surprisingly simple. It controls attention. Most of us live in an economy built on interruption. Every platform wants our eyes. Every app wants our time. Every feed wants to become the place where emotion is triggered, identity is performed, and social life is measured. Even when we are physically alone, we are rarely mentally alone. And even when we are with other people, we are often only partly there. The Amish, in many communities, remove a huge portion of that competition. If there is no social media feed pulling your attention outward every few minutes, then attention stays local. If there is no television dominating the room belongs to the people inside it. If there is no constant private stream of entertainment, then silence is not an enemy to kill. It becomes the space where life actually happens. That quiet is not empty. It is full of signals modern life often drowns out. You notice when a neighbor is tired. You remember who is sick. You hear the tension in someone's voice. You have time to sit at a table without half the conversation disappearing into a screen. You do not have 1,000 distant opinions entering your home every day, telling you how to feel, what to fear, what to buy, or who to become. Instead, the community itself becomes louder than the outside world. And that shift matters more than it may seem. Because unity is not created by liking the same posts. It is created by repeated, embodied experiences of mutual dependence. Seeing each other, helping each other, irritating each other, forgiving each other, working side by side, sharing meals, showing up when it is inconvenient. Social media can simulate connection, but it cannot replace obligation. And obligation is one of the hidden pillars of Amish life. But that was only part of the story. Because attention alone does not explain Amish unity. Geography does too. One of the most misunderstood Amish choices is the refusal to own cars. To outsiders, it can look like a stubborn rule against progress. But in many Amish communities, the concern is not the machine itself. It is what the machine does to social life. A car expands the radius of the self. With a car, you can leave quickly, work farther away, shop farther away, worship farther away, date farther away, spend your leisure time farther away. The farther your daily life spreads, the weaker your dependence on the people nearest to you. A horse and buggy does the opposite. It slows you down. It limits distance. It keeps life geographically dense. Your world becomes more local by design. You are more likely to buy nearby, visit nearby, work nearby, marry nearby, and remain woven into the rhythms of the district around you. That is not accidental. It is structural. In a modern city, people can live next door for years and never really know each other. In an Amish setting, movement itself makes isolation harder. Distance has a cost. Going somewhere takes time. So relationships close to home matter more. And here is the paradox. The very thing many people assume would make Amish life smaller is one of the things that makes its social bond stronger. Less mobility often means more continuity. Of course, many Amish people do ride in vehicles when needed. Some hire non-Amish drivers for business trips, long-distance travel, or emergencies. The issue is not that movement is forbidden in every form. The issue is ownership, independence, and the way unlimited mobility can dissolve the local fabric. In other words, the buggy is not just transportation. It is social architecture. And this is where things begin to change from interesting to profound. Because once you slow movement and reduce distraction, something else becomes possible. Community stops being a side effect. It becomes the center of life. In many Amish communities, church is not a separate building you disappear into once a week. Worship services often rotate between homes and barns. That means family space and sacred space overlap. Religion is not outsourced to an institution down the road. It enters the household, the meal, the preparation, the hosting, the cleanup, the memory. Even the size of many Amish church districts supports closeness. A congregation is not an anonymous crowd. It is a network of families who know one another in practical, daily ways. That closeness shows up most visibly in moments outsiders tend to remember, like a barn raising. A barn raising has become one of the most famous Amish images, and for good reason. It is dramatic, cooperative, and deeply symbolic. When a family needs a barn, men from the community gather to build it with astonishing speed, while women prepare food and support the event in equally essential ways. What could be months of struggle for one family becomes a shared task for many. But the deeper meaning is easy to miss. The barn is not simply a structure. It is proof of a social promise. It says, if disaster comes, you will not face it alone. If your labor is too heavy, it will be divided. If your loss threatens your future, the group will absorb part of the weight. That is unity in physical form. And the same principle extends beyond dramatic moments. Amish communities are known for mutual aid in everyday life too. In many cases, they do not rely on conventional insurance systems in the way most Americans do. Instead, families and church communities often pool resources, organize support, raise funds when medical bills become overwhelming, and carry one another through crisis. That sounds beautiful, and often it is. But it is also demanding. Because a safety net made of people only works if people remain committed to one another. It requires trust. It requires reputation. It requires restraint. It requires the belief that your life is not only your own private project. Modern individualism struggles with that idea. The Amish build on it. And if you want to understand why their communities can remain cohesive, you have to see how early that logic begins. Education, for example, is not just about information. It is about formation. In many Amish communities, children attend local one-room schools and usually stop formal schooling after the 8th grade. To many outsiders, that seems shocking. But within Amish life, the goal of education is not primarily upward mobility into a distant professional class. It is preparation for competent adulthood within the community. That means practical knowledge, discipline, literacy, numeracy, craft, and social responsibility are all tied together. Young people learn not only from books but from participation. They watch adults work. They join household routines. They absorb expectations through doing. And that matters because identity is easier to sustain when generations are still living in the same moral language. What makes this even more interesting is that the Amish are not frozen in time. They adapt. They innovate. They simply do it selectively. Some communities use batteries. Some use solar power in limited ways. Some allow certain tools for business. Refrigerators may run on propane. Safety lights may be used on buggies. Machinery may be modified to fit community standards. In some settings, a phone may exist in a controlled or shared form rather than inside the home as a constant portal to the outside world. So the Amish are not asking, is technology evil? They are asking, who will control whom? That difference is enormous. In much of modern life, people adopt a tool first and ask questions later. The Amish often reverse that process. They test whether a technology will undermine family life, invite vanity, loosen church discipline, or weaken local dependence. If it does, many communities reject it. If it can be adapted without doing that damage, they may allow it in some form. This selective logic is one reason outsiders often call Amish life inconsistent. Why permit one thing and not another? Why use a machine in one place but refuse it in another? Why accept a ride in a car but not own one? From the outside, those distinctions can look arbitrary. From the inside, they are part of a larger strategy. Slow the pace of change, preserve humility, and stop convenience from quietly becoming a new religion. That does not mean Amish life is easy. And it is important not to romanticize it. There is beauty in strong community, but there can also be pressure. Where belonging is deep, conformity can be powerful. The same closeness that protects people can also limit them. The same shared standards that create stability can feel confining to those who question them. Church discipline is real. In some Amish communities, members who break serious commitments and refuse to reconcile can face forms of shunning or separation. The purpose, within the tradition, is correction and restoration. But for those who live through it, the experience can be painful and deeply personal. That side of Amish life should not be ignored. Neither should the complexity of growing up Amish. Outsiders often focus on Rumspringa as if it were simply a dramatic season of rebellion. In reality, it is usually much less sensational than popular culture suggests. For many Amish teenagers, it is a period of transition, socializing, courtship, testing limits to varying degrees, and eventually deciding whether to be baptized into the church. That decision matters because Amish membership is tied to adult commitment, not just birth. And here is the remarkable part. In a culture saturated with alternatives, many still choose to stay. Why? Partly because leaving is costly, but also because staying offers something modern life often fails to provide: a defined place, a clear role, a thick web of belonging, and a moral world that tells you not only who you are, but who you are responsible to. That does not answer every criticism. It does not remove every hardship. But it does explain why an Amish community can remain socially durable even while surrounded by a culture moving in the opposite direction. And if we listen closely, this is where the story stops being only about the Amish. Because the forces they are resisting are not imaginary. They are the same forces reshaping the rest of us. More speed, less rootedness. More communication, less presence. More choice, less stability. More self-expression, less shared obligation. More noise, less meaning. The Amish response to those forces is radical, but it is also diagnostic. It reveals what modern life often takes for granted. For example, we usually assume that more connection automatically produces more community. But does it? Many people now communicate all day and still feel profoundly alone. We assume faster travel is always a social good. But what if constant mobility weakens the neighborhoods, congregations, and family networks that once gave people continuity? We assume constant access to information makes us wiser. But what if it mostly makes us more distracted, more agitated, and less available to the people physically in front of us? The Amish would not answer those questions with a TED Talk or a social media thread. They answer with a lifestyle. And that lifestyle carries another hidden lesson. Silence is not just the absence of sound. It is the absence of interference. In many non-Amish environments, daily life is filled with low-level chaos. Motors, notifications, background media, advertisements, headlines, opinions, music in every public corner, screens in waiting rooms, podcasts in the car, video clips before sleep. A mind can become so crowded that solitude starts to feel uncomfortable. But in a quieter world, internal life changes. Thoughts have room to finish. Conversations last longer. Boredom appears and then turns into something else: reflection, prayer, craft, memory, observation. When there is less noise competing for attention, the ordinary becomes more visible. The weather matters more. Seasonal rhythms matter more. Meals matter more. Neighbors matter more. Children are not just managed, they are absorbed into shared life. Elders are not just visited, they remain legible to the community. That kind of attentiveness is difficult to scale in a culture of permanent stimulation. And maybe that is part of the point. The Amish do not stay united because they discovered a secret app for healthy relationships. They stay united because their way of life still forces people into repeated contact with what modern systems often help us avoid: dependence, patience, inconvenience, and accountability. That is a high price. It may also be why the result is so rare. Far from disappearing, Amish communities have grown across hundreds of settlements and now number more than 400,000 people. Their growth is often tied not to aggressive outreach, but to large families and strong retention. In a century that keeps predicting the triumph of total assimilation, that endurance is striking. Not because it proves the Amish are perfect, but because it proves that an alternative social logic is still possible. A community can decide that not every innovation is worth the cost. A family can decide that convenience is not the same thing as flourishing. A religious group can decide that limits are not always oppression. Sometimes they are a way of protecting what would otherwise disappear. And maybe the most unsettling part of all this is that many of us already know, on some level, what the Amish have built their lives around. We know that a phone can dominate a room. We know that cars can free us and isolate us at the same time. We know that noise can become a way of avoiding ourselves. We know that endless entertainment can slowly thin out our capacity for stillness. We know that digital life can leave us informed but exhausted, connected but detached, visible but unseen. The Amish did not solve human nature. They did something more practical. They built structures that make certain virtues easier and certain temptations harder. That may be one of the deepest truths in this story. People do not live by values alone. They live by habits, spaces, tools, boundaries, and rituals. If your environment constantly rewards distraction, individualism, speed, and self-display, those things will become normal. If your environment rewards duty, local presence, modesty, and interdependence, a different kind of person begins to emerge. Not automatically, not perfectly, but more often. So how does an Amish community stay united without social media, cars, or constant noise? By giving up some of the freedoms that make fragmentation easy. By keeping life local enough that people still need one another. By treating attention as something sacred. By measuring technology not by what it can do, but by what it does to the soul of the group. By accepting inconvenience as the price of belonging. And by refusing to let the outside world set every term of what a good life should look like. You do not have to become Amish to feel the weight of that question. What in our own lives is making community harder than it needs to be? What have we gained in speed that we have lost in presence? What if the strongest communities of the future are not the ones with the most advanced tools, but the ones wise enough to place limits on them? The Amish answer that question with a road slow enough for a buggy, a home quiet enough for conversation, and a community strong enough to carry its own burdens. In a loud age, that kind of unity can look almost impossible, which may be exactly why it deserves our attention. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe for more thoughtful stories about culture, history, and the hidden systems that shape how people live. And if this topic stayed with you, let me know in the comments. What part of modern life do you think has done the most to weaken community, and what would it take to rebuild it?